Main Street is an optimistic place because it was derived from Walt Disney's hometown of Marceline, Missouri. He lived in the Midwest. He was a farm boy. And what he noticed as time was going on is that the little town that he remembered, little towns all over America were disappearing. So when he did Disneyland, he wanted to create a nostalgic place that he remembered. We tried to create a story behind the story, a scene behind the scene. And we really knew the sense of story and the depth we put into our facilities and everything we do would be more important on Main Street. And I think one of the most exciting evidences of that is in the arcades, which are basically there for inclement weather. But to walk down the arcade on the, I guess it would be the west side, is the Liberty Arcade. We wanted to showcase the involvement of France and America in the Statue of Liberty, to tell the story of what the Statue of Liberty meant as an icon of hope to immigrants and their first sign over the horizon of what America was about. So we thought it was a terrific story to tell. There's even a map of New York Harbor that's done in mosaic, that was done in Italy, on a computer, but it was done in Italy, and mapped out to show you where the Statue of Liberty is in New York Harbor. The other arcade is very museum-like as well, the Discovery Arcade. We found a man in Beverly Hills that has the largest collection of patent models of anyone. And these models are actually, you'd make a miniature of your invention, of your idea, and you'd send it to the patent office. And this gentleman was willing, because he wanted the European audience to see this collection, to loan us. And this is exclusive. No one else in the world has anything like this as a collection. The gas lights were derived, which I was so happy we got those. I think it makes all the difference having those pretty gas lights. And I think they also show in a winter environment that it's warm. They add movement. They were derived in shape and form from gas lights you would see at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. The train station's very, very important because it's a kinetic. You see the trains going by. I did the voice for the railroad. Now arriving from Grand Circle, trip around Disneyland Paris. Last call. The railroad station does have stained glass from the various lands. We modeled it after elevated train stations of New York City. Our city hall, it was very important to show Walt Disney as someone with a sympathy for France, because he loved France. Look at all the Disney movies, from Cinderella to the Aristocats, that are all set in French settings. And he had a love affair with Europe. He was an ambulance driver in World War I. And he drove the streets of Paris all night in this ambulance in 1918. And I know in our first aid station we have a photograph of him as the ambulance driver there from the First World War. He was decorated by the French government. The Storybook Store was modeled after sort of a turn-of-the-century library, that kind of cast-iron architecture of New York City, where the building interiors, you have cast-iron columns and so forth. We did that. My wife's favorite cartoon character is Tigger, so I at least thought it would be cool to have a Tigger that went, hoo-hoo-hoo, boing, boing, and stamps your book, and says, "Say there, that's a crazy-looking book," and he'd stamp your book as a souvenir. The Emporium, we researched grand department stores of the time. The columns on the interior are inspired by the columns in the Del Coronado Hotel in San Diego. We really tried to create a rich environment for it, and Tony Baxter, our senior VP, looked at the model, and the ceiling was really low and kind of oppressive. So we decided to open it up and do a stained glass dome in there. And if you look in the dome, you'll see the images of immigrated to America inventors. The other great key, and it's in our research photographs, is this money exchange system. There was a time in old retailing, the cashier would put the money in a basket, snap the lid shut, and they put the sales check in with it, but they weren't allowed to handle the change. They would pull a cord, and it would shoot that basket all the way upstairs into another room, and they would make the change, do the sales check and so forth, put the change in it, and send it right back out, back to the cashier. It's exciting to be able to put those details in. I was pretty satisfied with that. It also connects to a barber shop, and that barber shop is dead on out of research photos. And that was sort of the place, the old barber shop, that was a social point. That's where people would get together, and that's really where things would happen at the turn of the century for men. For father would go get his hair cut or his mustache shaved, and all those pieces are antiques. Those barber chairs were purchased from Northern California. They are all antique. They are all totally legit. No reproductions. All that stuff is real in there. And that, by the way, that's Flower Street where that facade is. And the funny thing is, where we're taping this interview today at Walt Disney Imagineering is 1401 Flower Street. This is the address where Disneyland was created, where Disneyland Paris was created. And Walt's American Restaurant has that address. So anyone out there in the audience that goes to Walt's American Restaurant can say that they've been to 1401 Flower Street, because really we wanted to take the art and spirit of Walt Disney, the spirit of Imagineering, which is the art of kind of creativity, and sort of encapsulate it in a restaurant that tells the story for A, what Main Street is, and also how were the lands of the park created when it went into that. So the ground floor, the lower floor of Walt's restaurant, is very much the story of Walt Disney and his personal fantasies. And the whole lobby is his family. His mom, his dad, all of his family members are depicted there. And now that we're on the top floor, we're going to see the newest generation of Disney, which is every dining room done as Victorians would. And there's some research photographs that you can see how we tried to make these accurate Victorian dining rooms, very tiny and intimate, that represented the art and design of each area of the park. That's a real special environment. Disney and Company. Here's an interesting thing. When it comes to merchandise, one of the biggest challenges you have is you're creating this beautiful Victorian environment, and the stuff that they're going to sell in there has nothing to do with what the environment's going to look like. So how do you create a space that works for that? So we had butted our heads against the wall and finally decided, well, you know what? Let's do something that represents a carnival or a fairground. And we took all of the rounding boards for carousels and used them as inspiration, and took all the seasons of the great moments in American history and then painted those as the scenes in this area, and then added character and fun and band organs, and put the band organ calliope music. Every song is a patriotic song, incidentally, that plays in there on a soundtrack. Casey's Corner. We always had Coca-Cola refreshment corner in other parks, and there's really not any theme. It's red and gray striped wallpaper. And we thought, gee, in Europe, what do we have here? We got Coca-Cola, hot dogs, peanuts. That's sports food. That's food you find at a baseball game. Why don't we go and create a whole theme around it? So the imagery of America is very much tied to baseball. So that was the reason we did Casey's. One thing about Main Street is we try to make every interior different, diametrically opposed to the interior next door. Casey's is very masculine with the blood red walls and the white trim. Then there's the Disney and Company, of course, is a fairground and very light and sweet. And then there's Walt's Restaurant, very elegant, on the other side. So we tried to do that. But then we looked at the Main Street in its plan, looking down at it, and said, well, what's across the street? People don't just walk down one side. They're like a pinball in a pinball machine. They go back and forth. So what we decided to do is, if this is the guy's place on one side of the street, Gibson's is on the other side of the street. And it's in American films like The Music Man, for example, the malt shop was always the place of romance. The high school kids hung out there. It was about Valentines and so forth. We thought, let's just put a little twist on it. We'll make it a traditional ice cream parlor, or at least look like one. But then we'll call it the Gibson Girl. Now, the Gibson Girl was a cartoon done by Charles Dana Gibson, and considered to be one of the most beautiful images of that every woman wanted to look like. Why? Because he inspired the whole suffrage and women's movement with his art. He made the woman a completely aloof creature that could care less whether the guy was interested in her or not. It was the ultimate hard-to-get figure. And his cartoons are incredibly funny and incredibly irreverent. And we took the very best of the cartoon and then put them up inside the Gibson Girl restaurant. Victoria's is like a visit to grandmother's house. And I think what's very strange about going to grandmother's house is when you're sitting at grandmother's dinner table and you're looking around the room going, Guy, why did she collect all this stuff? I think all of our grandmothers have things that we don't necessarily pick, or they've collected everything that we don't want in our family drawer anymore. They've got it in their drawer, and that's what makes grandmothers so loving and special. Grandmother would have the organ and all the song sheets. There always was the parlor. One of the rooms is, in Victorian times, you didn't have TV or anything else to do, so people would sing songs on song sheets. That was more exciting than records, before they came out. So all of those sorts of things, we tried to create places where people would have dined at that time, and to give you a sense of it. Just beyond that is the cable car bake shop. And again, what do you do with Victorian when you get to a point where people have sort of seen, where are you going to find prettier bakeries than France? I mean, it's pretty hard. When Europeans go to San Francisco, well, you got to go on the cable cars, right? So the whole area was dedicated to that. For lighting, Louis Comfort Tiffany, another American designer. So we, of course, they're reproductions, but we decided, and Tiffany lamps are very synonymous with San Francisco for some reason. So we decided to go with the Tiffany lamps to create that irreverent, wild American kind of over-the-top feel. Every single object is dedicated to the history of the cable car. Again, contrast. China Store, Harrington's. I think Harrington, the name Harrington, came from one of the Disney films, Summer Magic, or you could look in the fact sheet for that. But the China Store was just meant to be very, very elegant, and to just showcase whatever we wanted to sell as far as a product would be in this beautiful packaging, would at least feel like it was even more valuable than it was. But again, I just think people like round spaces. I like round spaces. Disney, all these places have round circular spaces. That dome is very much of a shock to the system because you don't expect it at all. These little facade, and it kind of breaks into something large. The market house is great because we could prop it out to look just like a period old delicatessen or market to give you a sense of what products were like that you could buy. And there's even a party line phone. You know, there is a whole citizenry that's on the telephone because back then telephones were all connected on one line. So in America at that time, you'd have to wait your turn to make your call, and people would eavesdrop all afternoon on other people's conversations. And those phones are found in the camera store, the market house, and this barber shop. Also, there's a switchboard behind the counter that has the little flashing lights. You got to get a feeling that there's an old telephone switchboard in the market house. And I was so delighted that we could get a big, beautiful cast iron stove and put, it actually has enough heat in it to feel heat without burning you. And that's an effect we put in. Of course, that street's Market Street, which is the name of a famous street in San Francisco. And we styled the ice cream parlor and the coffee bean, even the palettes, the coffee places in browns, the ice cream places in ice cream colors. And the facades are all designed and derived to have that this sort of look. Main Street Motors originally started out just as sort of a great marquee piece because the idea was if it's about progressive attitude, the car was these are all about symbols of freedom. The automobile was a symbol of freedom. So the whole idea of having a car dealership on Main Street, and at the time when we opened the park, we really wanted to sell cars in there just for the complete cachet of being totally outrageous and just saying that you could sell other things in there, but the fact that you could, if you want to, buy a car at Disneyland, that's how insane it is and how wonderful it is. Now, the Disney Clothiers space, we wanted to give you the impression, and it's evolved over a period of time. It's not quite like this today, but that store, you'll be able to look through it and be able to get the sense that this once had a home, where there was a home or a row house in the back, and the person was so successful with their business in the front, they blew the wall out and expanded into it. Some of the casework were bought at auctions and then modified and turned in. They're real antiques. Boardwalk Candy Palace. Candies are already something that Europe is so well known for, and the only thing we could find that was fun and exciting was saltwater taffy. It's a truly American candy, invented in a place that was an amusement park on the East Coast called Atlantic City. And the reason why Atlantic City was famous is it had a big pier out in the ocean and a walkway made of wood called a boardwalk. And it was very, very big, and people would push each other down these wicker chairs on the boardwalk. It was very fun. And we knew, being in Europe, same with the Plaza Inn, which we'll get to, is we had to do things with murals. We had to do things with pictures, because people aren't going to always be able to read the words. So we would do a big mural and show you what the place was supposed to be about, show you the candy store. Town Square Photography, we really wanted to do a photo essay of Americana. But we didn't want to go out and shoot it. We wanted to find in auctions and in people's backyard home memories photos they had taken from the turn of the century and then create a whole pastiche of life at that time. So there's little African-American kids standing in front of the American flag holding hands on 4th of July. There's all sorts of photographs that are in the counters and in the walls all around the space. And we try to create a very, very earthy and disorganized kind of interior. Because all that stuff is bought at turn of the century yard sales and stuff that were brought out here, and they're all in English. There's no French things in there at all or European. It's all very legitimate. Ribbons and Bows Hat Shop. We probably tried 1,000 color schemes in there. Our head scenic artist, Ron Esposito, walked in and looked at it and said, you know what? let's make it wood grain. And it was his idea, and we wood grained the whole place, and we painted it all to look like mahogany, and I was tickled to death. It looked great. So I was very happy with the hat shop. The last space is the Plaza Gardens. And actually, I guess we wanted to appeal to people's sense of romance. Even though it's a buffet-style dining experience, we wanted to create a very elegant and up experience in there. And then, to sort of show the purpose, we did a series of 3 paintings. David Negron did the final artwork on about three pieces in there that show the dance at autumn, ballooning in the springtime, and so forth. And it really gives you the sense of what is supposed to happen in the space. What is the action? Where are we, and what are we doing? We also had to have citizens on Main Street. I think one of the great mysteries of Disneyland is walking in and finding something unexpected. So we put sound effects, and this was done in the 50s, and Walt Disney loved this, is having people upstairs. I'm sure the cast members are aware that we have also dedicated windows to the various people. The window that I have is on Town Square East, and it's a dentist office. And all the show producers share the window because our business is making you smile, but we're all a little crazy, so it's dentists in training. And we wanted to have something that was just almost on the border of what Disney would do, just to make it fun. And I'm actually the voices of these characters up there. So I'm the doctor there, and he comes up and says, "Okay, who's next? Who's next?" And they pull in the drill, you know. and if I know the dentists are harrowing for people, but you hear the you hear the and the fact that this was Walt's hometown, what we did, we also dedicated the windows to people that Walt Disney knew at that time in his life. Walt Disney's first picture was commissioned by Robert Sherwood, who was the country doctor. He paid him 25 cents to draw his horse. Dr. Sherwood has a flat on one of the Market Street row houses. He has a residence, and I think he also has a window on Main Street. The steam trains are interesting in that we have four locomotives right now and 4 sets of cars. They're all different. We wanted to make them based on American history. The George Washington, the #1 train, is the first train that was built. It's based on a Civil War military train. It's painted in those kind of military colors. It's dedicated to the East Coast. Every railroad car is named for a different place, the Chesapeake, the Mount Vernon. They're mostly battle sites from the Revolutionary War, and they're French and American in its mood. The remainder of the trains, one's called the Eureka, which is dedicated to California and the West Coast. The Eureka was based on the design I found in a research book of a construction train that was building the remainder of the railroad that linked America together. It was an important point of history when America was joined in the center of the country by rails. And that train represents that. The one called the Holiday, which is green, represents the typical train from research that would take people on holidays, would take you out to resort hotels. The railroad would build a train to the beach and then build a big hotel and ship everybody there and make a lot of money. So that was sort of the scheme of things. That's an excursion train of the East Coast or New York. And the final one is the one you've seen in every cowboy movie known to man, based on the old Denver and Rio Grande trains that Butch Cassidy used to rob. And that's the W.B. Cody. And that's based on the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. So all those trains are based on a historic basis. It's the same basic engineering model, but we've just cosmetically dressed them. They've had beauty makeovers to be 4 different historic locomotives. I'm very proud of the efforts that the entire team of Imagineering has put into Main Street. I think the most important thing about Main Street, more important than the architecture, the Statue of Liberty, and the trains, is the cast members. The most important ingredient of Main Street, the thing that will make it or ruin it, is that spirit of optimism we tried to put in the buildings has to be in you, has to be in every single cast member that portrays the story of Main Street. You are the story of what we're doing, and that's what I think it's all about.